Welcome to EnneaQuest as we dive deeper into the Enneagram. Our theme in the Wisdom Seeker Society this month is energy. And is that my noisiness? Energy and the Enneagram is actually how I pulled Saffron in initially. I think it was 2 years ago, if not longer, for this specific theme around the energies of the Enneagram. So, Saffron, welcome and thank you so much for joining me and still being in my world.
Thank you for having me. I love this. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Um,
Talking Enneagram.
Energy is kind of almost what I feel the Enneagram brings in general. Like there's an energy about it on its own. How do you feel about energy and the Enneagram?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah,
And I often say, everything is energy and energy is everything.
yeah,
And anything that has energy can have an Enneagram energy. So, yeah, you can Enneagram anything.
yeah,
Mm, yeah.
yeah. And there's a lot of energy movement happening in this cycle that we're in. I mean, you're in the southern hemisphere, I'm in the northern hemisphere. We are supposed to be, or we are going into kind of the restful time. You, I think, are having a bit of a pause because I know there's some snow and coldness and things happening there at the moment. But you are going into this blossoming kind of energetic move into more vibrance, I suppose. So, as you say, energy is everywhere. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It's only transformed. Um, yeah. But our theme today is vital currents, and for me, it's kind of that underlying energy. Each type, I think, taps into or expresses themselves through a different energy. Um,
You're totally right. And I
mm,
think it's more, this, Michelle, is the moment to introduce the subtypes.
yes,
Yeah. Because that, understanding the subtypes gives us a much, much more accurate understanding of that underlying energy that you speak of,
mm,
which is so nuanced and so subtle,
mm,
and really a combination of your dominant behavioral instinct, your second and then dormant behavioral instinct combined with your number or your lead type. That is
yeah,
the subtle energy with which we show up in the world from an Enneagram perspective. And I think
mm,
to think that one understands or recognizes or is able to tap into the full wisdom of the Enneagram before one learns the subtypes, I think is a mistake.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I agree. I think for me, um, having a background in psychometry and having kind of studied all these things and then having looked at the enneagram and seeing it as a typology, wrongly obviously, um, but then learning with you from you, and looking at it with subtypes, it brings a different energy. Each type, I think, has a general energy, but within each type, those subtypes changes the the way that people show up, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm,
Exactly. The focus of attention, what's important to them, where they would put their energy, where they waste energy, where they give not enough energy, where they put too much energy, and just really why certain people clash too energetically,
yes.
and why certain people work
Mm,
energetically.
mm,
Because of this combination of energy usage, I suppose. That's what relationships really are all about, you know.
Mm. You remind me now of something you wrote. I think it was a blog that you wrote for me about body language and energy. Um, can you remind me what that was? Because that was also kind of, when we walk into a space, or when we um, in person, which doesn't, I mean, it's happening now more and more, but I think a lot of our connections these days are online. But in person, there's definitely a physical energy present. Yeah,
Even online, there's a
yeah,
physical energy present.
yeah, yeah.
We all have a very particular body energy.
Mm,
And yeah, what I was probably saying in the blog, and what I firmly believe, is that it's incorrect to talk about body language.
mm,
Body language cannot be accurately interpreted by anybody ever, because body language is very subtly conditioned culturally, pop culturally, subculturally, gender wise, etc. There's a lot of conditioning. And there's been a lot of research done into body language and how false it is from point of view of expression of how we're really feeling and what we're really thinking.
yeah.
So I talk about body energy.
Mm,
And body energy is, I think, the combination of our type and our dominant subtype. So some people have like quite an intense, forward moving, sort of captivating, demanding, deepening, charismatic energy about them. You know what I mean,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then underlying that, and this is what I loved about when you were talking a minute ago about the sort of underpinned, subtle,
Mm,
very, yeah, is I think the type.
okay.
So for the one, it's to fix,
Mm,
sort of single-minded, determined, zealot-like, preacher-like person
mm.
whose aim is to get people to think like them.
Interesting. And they use structure. Like I always, when I think of a one, I think of a Excel sheet.
So
Yeah.
when you think of the one, think of the person who's idealistically wanting to fix and improve the world, or people in it, or situations, or whatever. And in the sexual instinct, this person is single-minded, ultra-focused,
Mm,
because the sexual instinct is intense, and then the one's kind of laser focus to fix and improve is intense.
mm,
So it's not so much, this one, interestingly, might not have a spreadsheet,
mm.
but they'll have a spreadsheet in their mind.
Yeah. There's a
And
pattern. Is it a pattern? Is it a
it's a list,
okay.
and it's got to be ticked off. And
Yeah.
lists become spreadsheets. And yeah, maybe they're patterns, but it's all around, yeah, maybe fixing and organizing into order so that I can think straight. I'm just sort of channeling the inner one in me.
Yeah.
But with the sexual one, there's a forcefulness, like an outward forcefulness, which
Mm,
makes this person quite intense.
okay.
Whereas the self-preservation one looks totally different. They look more six-ish. They kind of flustered and
Mm,
get easily anxious, because self-praise people are more anxious anyway. They're always more anxious, regardless of the type. But also this person is really preoccupied and very, very pedantic about keeping order around them in their immediate domestic surroundings and in themselves.
mm.
So they're fixing in. So anyway, I'm getting too detailed, but the point is that this can you. I'm sure that you can sense what I mean. That there's a very different energy
Yeah.
underpinning.
Yeah. And then there's the social. There's a, so subtypes are either social, sexual, or self-praise.
Correct.
And they each have a very different energy.
Totally.
Where,
So
and then,
there's always this basic proposition, like every type has this basic proposition. For the one, it's to fix and improve. And then that basic proposition gets channeled into different aspects of our lives, depending on our dominant focus, dominant behavior, or dominant instinct.
yeah.
So like your self-praise, I think.
Yeah.
So your basic proposition as a 4, which is where do I belong? I'm going to push boundaries. I'm going to channel. I'm going to challenge edges. I'm going to take things to the extreme. I'm going to rebel. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to show you.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's that one as well. So, I mean, the 4 integrates, to the one. So when I'm stressed, then I clean and organize and fix my surroundings.
You see, there's that word fix.
Mm.
And there's a gift in that for you. Because then at least you keep order and structure, and which some 4s can really struggle with.
Yeah. Which is also relative. I mean, it's, yeah. Others might not see the order like I see it. Like for me, it's like an organized mess sometimes. But if it's not my organized mess, then I kind of lose perspective because, one thing can be where it shouldn't be in a moment of stress, and that creates complete meltdown. Yeah. Which I suppose is a form of control. That self-praise, it's a survival instinct. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's a survival instinct. And it's to do again with our woundings. We get back to what we always talk about.
Yeah.
It's almost unavoidable. I've been thinking a lot about psychological safety.
Yeah.
And I think, our energy also is an indication. This is why body energy and being conscious of that, I think, is so much more powerful and constructive in creating psychological safety amongst us and in relationships, much more so than body language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Psychological safety, I think, as a collective, if we look at our collective consciousness as humans, as a global community, are we currently feeling psychologically safe? And the answer is no.
Yeah, definitely not.
And what actually I think this whole sort of drive towards inclusivity and, diversity, belonging, that being a big conversation with a lot of people right now. I think the reason for this is because people energetically at a very subtle level are feeling isolated and alone and excluded.
And not seen for who, yeah.
And not heard, and they don't know where they belong.
Yeah.
And this is a crisis.
And I have this conversation quite often these days in the neurodivergent space. We seem to be so hungry for belonging that we box ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And interestingly, yes, as a result, I think as a society, we've been avoiding intimacy, into me, intimo, Intimacy comes from a Latin word, intimo, which actually means to look inside oneself.
Yeah. Into me you see.
Into
Intimacy.
me I see.
Yeah.
Into intimacy. Into
Mm.
me I see. With fear. That's what it means. With fear, too. Most people are too afraid to have an intimate relationship with themselves.
Mm. Yeah. I am quite interested in this concept aspect, and how we can be in silence, in practicing silence, um, in groups or with each other, because it becomes so intimate, and it becomes as to, I mean, there's so much happening within each of us at any point. It's almost sometimes the noises we make are separating ourselves from that hosting the experience, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does make sense. It's like separation creates, when like for example in Orthodox Judaism,
Mm.
you're not allowed to touch one another when you're still courting.
Yeah.
It makes it's that same silence and closeness, but no actual touch creates massive intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, but I think as a global community, we must be very conscious of how we authentically show up energetically,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of separation and therefore psychological lack of safety
Hmm.
because of our fake energy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Because we feel that we are expected to be a certain way, and
Yes.
and it doesn't um, ring true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So I suppose that's my message tonight for anybody listening
Mm.
is that it's like who, what is your energetically, what feels good for you for real inside.
And do you agree, maybe, that we can only get there through being uncomfortable, through
Yes.
stepping out of what we think feels good?
Yes. Stepping out of the habit, stepping
Yeah,
out of what we think feels good, but actually is it just not familiar?
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
That's your Enneagram pattern.
Mm. The
Yeah.
familiarity.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's what's familiar. So to stop that bus and get off it into a territory that feels perhaps uncomfortable, but then ultimately is a huge relief.
yeah. Mm.
Mm.
Mm. I like that.
Yeah, different energy.
Yes, yes. And it's important to tap in, to kind of go into intimacy, to be intimate with self, which I think is a different energy for each subtype. For example, the social subtype would struggle with that, because I want to belong, I want to fit in, maybe even more than belong.
There's your four bias.
Yeah.
Yeah, the social four is all about where do I fit in. The social one is very clear where they fit in. They are the head girl. They're the one saying, listen, I'm the paragon, I'm the demonstrator of perfection in this group. Very different energy to the social four who's lamenting, yeah, where they fit in, if they even exist on this planet, if they should be here, or if they caught the wrong spaceship. There's a lot of shame in a huge amount of comparing themselves, because all fours compare themselves.
Mm.
That's where the
Yeah.
envy comes from. But the social four has so many people to compare themselves to.
Mm.
That's a lot of burden.
which creates all this internal energy, maybe more than an
Yeah.
external. And yeah,
huge internal struggle around fitting in and being good enough to fit in and all of that. Whereas the social 5 doesn't have that struggle at all. They connect intellectually with other like-minded intellectuals, or they don't. And they're quite active, they're quite present, but just intellectually. And then when the conversation or project is over or whatever, they're done. That's it.
yeah,
Move on to the next thing. And
yeah,
that's how they are compartmentalized. So again, just because they share a subtype doesn't mean that they're going to show up the same energetically, because then you've got a combination of the type.
that's it. And the wing, you know, so
And
it's that code.
health. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what becomes a whole code.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you also have lots of insights as to the energies that match different kind of, you know, types and wings and subtypes that energetically match with others, and some not so much.
Yes.
Yeah, which is
Yeah. So,
interesting.
yeah, I mean, I think that all of them match. I don't think it's fair to say that any type or subtype can't be together or don't get
Yeah,
along.
yeah,
I think it's more about exploring where they would find synergy and possibly where they would find clash, and explaining why, and then working with that
yeah.
combination.
Which also starts with how much work they do, you know, in integrating all their own
Yeah.
woundings and things that they bring to the table. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it is that individualistic approach, really, because we are no, not all fours, wing fives, self praise are the same either. Or, you know,
Oh.
yeah,
At all. I think the gender conditioning plays a part, religious conditioning, education conditioning, rural urban conditioning,
mm,
occupational conditioning.
mhm,
There's so many things.
yeah, exactly.
Mm, yeah.
Thank you so much. That is a little bit of a kind of an iceberg look at
Mm,
the underlying energies. I mean, there's so much to go into depth with that, and I know you touch on all of that in your courses and, you know, your work. And if anybody wants to catch up on the amazing work Saffron's doing. I know you're also going on a very interesting trip. I think it's next week, is it? You're going to
Right.
Vegas.
Right, baby, I'm going to Vegas.
Well,
Yeah.
that's energy conversation to be had.
Wow. Vegas is energy,
Yeah.
man. I'm gonna just take lots of photographs and try and get married. Yeah.
By
Yeah.
Alvin.
Yeah, exactly so. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, have
exactly.
lots of fun, and I hope we get to. I know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas,
I
but
know
hopefully,
it's Vegas, maybe, but I'll definitely tell you about my trip when I
yeah.
next speak to you on this channel.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Have
Thank you
lots
for
of
the
fun.
wonderful conversation.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
pleasure. Good
Bye.
night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.